Please tell us a little bit about Northwest Immigrant Rights Project's VAWA unit and your role with the organization.
Supervising attorney with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project in the VAWA unit. And I specifically focus on working with survivors of both labor and sex trafficking. In the VAWA unit, the reason why it's called VAWA, it's named after the Violence Against Women Act. And despite the name, we represent all genders um, for nationals from all over the world who are survivors of trafficking, domestic violence, and other crimes. And we assess whether they're eligible for different types of visas, or we represent them in immigration court. Our services span through all parts of the immigration process.
What types of industries does human trafficking typically occur?
Human trafficking occurs in many different industries. I think one thing to remember is that human trafficking can affect, again, all genders, all ages, and again, it doesn't discriminate against where you're from or your sexual orientation or your gender. Um, but there are, and again, it can span across all industries. Some CAST, which is the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, came out with a great report that summarizes the major industries where they have seen human trafficking. And they've seen it in agriculture, hospitality, like hotels, in like we often see it like where a family member will be the trafficker, like an aunt or even a parent, and have the person be forced to work in that the family industry or the family business. It can also be domestic servitude. So there's not a particular industry that we necessarily focus on. We really assess on what the situation is and what happened to the individual to assess whether they're a survivor of human trafficking.
How has COVID 19 directly impacted those currently being exploited?
Well, first off, by saying that I can't speak for survivors or people who are currently in the situation. And I think this question does go directly to that, to a survivor's perspective and how it's affected them. I can say things that we're worried about is that we're not getting as many referrals, and we think, and we don't know for sure because again, that's a survivor's perspective, is that some people are stuck in the situation because of COVID-19 and they can't get out of it. Or even if they've escaped, seeking legal immigration services is not their top priority right now. Their top priority is accessing food, accessing shelter. I have heard reports that they believe sex trafficking may have increased and domestic violence may have increased. Again, I can't speak directly from a survivor's perspective, but we're concerned that it's definitely gotten worse and people are being more exploited in COVID-19. I can say for my clients, a lot of my clients are struggling with COVID-19, the global pandemic. Many are struggling to find housing, to accessing medical services, mental health services, and just making sure that they have access to food. So I think people who we're currently working with are facing the same struggles or more struggles than people who are vulnerable during this global pandemic. And then again, we're worried that there's people stuck in situations that we can't confirm right now, but we're worried that we'll probably find out in a couple years after this pandemic is over.
What other community resources can you recommend for a victim of human trafficking?
So we have a lot of great community resources in Seattle, the Seattle area, and in Washington State. The main resource that I work with is the Washington Anti-Trafficking Response Network, which includes International Rescue Committee, API Chaya, Youth Care, and REST, which is Real Escape from the Sex Trade. And that organization provides social services to survivors of trafficking. At NERP, we provide legal services, which is a very small role of what survivors of trafficking need and should have access to. We're not mental health providers, we're not therapists. And so having a social service organization like International Rescue Committee to work with us while we're going through like an immigration visa application is very essential. There's also other programs. I know Swedish has a program that offers free medical services, and there's law enforcement also can be helpful in reporting trafficking and helping, like getting criminal justice, and also in some cases temporary work permits. So we do have a great network here, and I just touched the very surface level of the types of organizations that are available, but it's very important that we want to work in a very holistic way when we're working with survivors, because it's really hard to go through an immigration visa application, for example. It's just hard you have to retell your story, and oftentimes clients want access to medical services, access to mental health services. A lot of times people won't have a work permit for years. And so getting access to social services where they can get support with help with food, help with housing is really essential in working with survivors of trafficking.
In what ways can the Highline community support NERP in combating human trafficking?
Um, the top needs that I've worked with social service providers in identifying these top needs. And we would say, one, access to housing, two, access to mental health services. There is a huge need for mental health services. There's very little access. If you don't have insurance, if you can't pay out of pocket, there is very little access to counseling, and oftentimes for like even just we want to get a psychological evaluation, and those are extremely expensive. So housing, mental health services. And then the third one is more social services and more like direct people working direct rep, like what I do, like what the social service providers at International Rescue Committee and API Chaya do, more people to work with clients directly and help them navigate the system. Those are the top three. For what Highline community wants to do, you can always do donations to different organizations. And I think that's the main thing that we would look for. Or you can volunteer. We always need interpretation services, for example, at NERP, and I'm sure they do as well at the other social service organizations.